I got 50 minutes. Oh,
Welcome, everyone, to Buddha's Center. My name is Jeff Allen, and thank you so much for coming this evening and allowing me to discuss with you what our lamas were so kind to us to discuss with us. And especially Namgyal Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche was so kind for so many years to discuss the topic of the stages of the path to enlightenment in such a flawless manner and in such an in-depth manner that I feel so fortunate to have something to share with you tonight. So before we get started, because this is a Mahayana teaching, and we want to set our proper motivation, let's set our proper motivation where we share this gift of the Dharma with other sentient beings. We don't just think of ourselves and what we can gain from this or how we could, benefit just for ourselves because of attending this teaching. We think of how we could benefit all sentient beings and how a Buddha would benefit all sentient beings. And he or she would benefit all sentient beings by teaching them the truth of suchness in their own individual languages, in their own individual aptitudes. So let's start by setting a motivation that says, hey, I'm going to imagine I can do these things. I'm going to try to set my mind up in such a way that it leaves imprints there for those ripening effects to occur, where I one day can actually emanate bodies to each and every single sentient being and teach them the truth of the suchness and their own individual capacities in such a way that they'll be able to gain ground on their spiritual path. So let's imagine that we're doing that this evening, because we know that this is a teaching for beings of three capacities. And anyone who's entering into a spiritual path and wants to engage in a religious life, according to Buddhism, begins at the beginning stages where you start to recognize the downfalls of the lower realms of cyclic existence, and you learn more and more and more through various stages where you start to then see that not only the lower realms of cyclic existence are a problem, but the higher realms are too. And then you want to get out of the cycle altogether. And then you reach a place where you want to then also bring other sentient beings out of that cycle and bring them to the state of the ultimate perfection that can only be achieved by putting others' needs before your own in the Mahayana. So here, we're leaving not only tracks in our minds to be able to engage in these, but we're also knowing that the kind of teaching that's being given is appropriate for all different types of beings, because the Lam Rim is an all-inclusive tradition that begins with the beginning place where you can say, I'm a spiritual practitioner, I'm a Buddhist religious practitioner, to the place where you can say, I'm a Buddha. So all the variables in between and all the different aptitudes that we have are catered to by these holy beings to show us how to evolve. So this is such a special thing. This is the most fortunate gift we've ever received from our teachers like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Geshe Lobsang Gompo Rinpoche and Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche and Geshe Doje Damdu Rinpoche and Umzala Geshe Aga Rinpoche, all of these incredible masters. It's because of their kindness that we're able to be here this evening. So let's imagine that we are able to engage in these activities and share this gift that we've been given by our holy teachers. And normally when we have a gift that we're given, we keep it for ourselves, we keep it safe. Sometimes we wash it, sometimes we keep it in a safe, but we certainly don't want everyone in the universe to share in that special thing that we have usually. But we've been given a gift that's more important than anything that we've ever had in our any of our existence, or as important if we've been presented with this truth before. Now let's imagine that we're sharing it with all sentient beings. So imagine, as I chant these words, that you invite all sentient beings here, as I will try my best to imagine that I'm doing so. Imagine that you bring all the hell beings, the hot hells, the cold hells, the surrounding hells, all the hungry ghost beings with all of their troubles, all of the animal realms, all of those beings who are in the sea and on the ground and above the ground in the sky, imagining all those beings in the universe that you're bringing here. And then you imagine that you're bringing human beings here, and you imagine you're bringing them in the order of friends, neutrals, and enemies, and you're inviting each and every one of these beings here. And here, when you're doing this part, you can see a sign that may occur in your mind to let you know if you've even gotten the pre-step under control of the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, which is equanimity. In that step, we see our mind's reaction to the various types of beings. And we can see how our mind reacts as we call these beings, as we call our friends, how we have this very strong yearning for them to have the most happiness they can have and freedom from suffering. And then we call neutral beings on and in, and it's not hard to call them in, but we don't feel as strongly about those beings as we do about the friends. And when we call in enemies, we certainly see a different feeling, even in relation to the strangers and our friends. So it's important for us to analyze what our mind's reaction is when we do in the most full way this practice or this kind of mental exercise of bringing beings in. It's very easy for us to just imagine bringing beings in that are kind of vague in the lower realms, and then the animal realms, some of the dogs and cats and goats and sheep and stuff you can think of. It's easier to do that. Your mind won't be as apt to jump so rapidly when you're doing that. But when you get to human beings and you start to see your mind's reaction to the 3 types of beings, while you call them here to share a gift with them, and you have to call all the beings on the TV you dislike, beings in your daily life that you dislike or you find difficult, people, you have to have the same equal desire to benefit them as you do for the person that you're calling and saying, please come, I love you so much, you're my friend, you're my close person. You shouldn't feel any different about inviting someone you find very disgusting or distasteful in terms of their behavior, because there is conventionally bad and good, so you see something there. But you in your mind should have worked on this enough that you can see a lessening of the disinclination to invite those that you find difficult, or just saying, well, we'll just skip that. And so I don't have to have my mind react to that. And I really suggest that you take your, most strong emotions that you relate to beings, and when you slam those categories in, see how your mind reacts, and see how long you can stay on strangers, people you don't know, before you start to conceptualize, oh, but I wonder who those strangers are and what their beliefs are, and if they help people, and do they harm people, and is this someone that I really would consider a stranger? They're kind of maybe an enemy. I was speaking with Umzala Geshe Aga, how the mind can just jump in and then catch everything that you're trying to do. So this is about training our mind and seeing that what our mind's doing, telling our minds what to do. And when our minds aren't doing what we're telling them to do, we'll know, because we have that spy of introspection we've talked so much about that says, hey, you told your mind you were going to do this. You were supposed to not forget to do this, and you seem to not be doing what you told yourself to do. Hey, I caught it. And mindfulness can say, hey, let me bring this back. Maybe you weren't being conscientious enough to even be mindful, or have that spy in the mind go, hey. So it's so important that we're looking at these teachings in this way, as a transformational process, as a way to engage in these practices that seem like, oh, Jeff always talks about the same thing over and over again. But if you look at your reaction of your mind as you're doing this, you can gauge it week to week. You can see if you're making progress. You can see if it's the same, if you haven't done the 7-point cause and effect or equalizing, changing self with others practice throughout the week, which has as the foundation of the 7-point, the equanimity practice, where you recognize that friends, enemies, and neutrals really should have this equal status of your willingness to benefit them. If you're going to then feel good enough to say every one of them has been as good as my kind as someone like my mother, or my closest person who would take care of me in my most vulnerable state. So this is our task at hand. So I say that in the language of the gods, Nagas and Yakshas, in the language of humans and of demons and of humans too, and however many kinds of speech there may be, I shall proclaim the Dharma in the language of all. Laike dan lu dan no jin ke zhe ban da da mi ke nan dan zhe wa ji zhe nan Samba Tanje Kedu Dagi Juden Do. And now that we've invited all sentient beings here, homage to the from Lama Tsongkhapa's three principal paths, three principal aspects of the path, sometimes translated as homage to the foremost lamas. I will explain as well as I can the essential meaning of all the conqueror's scriptures, the path praised by the excellent conqueror's children, the port for the fortunate wishing liberation. Whoever are not attached to the pleasures of mundane existence, whoever strive in order to make leisure and fortune worthwhile, whoever incline to the path pleasing to the conqueror Buddha, those fortunate ones should listen with a clear mind. So looking at that stanza, the first stanza that says, I will explain as well as I can, then there's three sentences that are there. So it's 4 lines, three, after it says, I will explain as well as I can, this promise to compose. Then Lama Tsongkhapa says the essential meaning of the conqueror's scriptures, the path praised by the excellent conqueror's children, the port for the fortunate wishing liberation. So this can be explained in 2 different ways. And very, very realized lamas and commentators have explained this in 2 different ways. So I'll show you the 2 different ways so that you can say, oh, okay, if I hear it a different way than someone who just said it, they're not wrong. It's just a different way to interpret it. So when we see the first line, so some commentators, some lamas will say that this whole thing refers to the 3 principal paths. What are the 3 principal paths? Renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness. So some commentators would say, well, of course, the essential meaning of all the conqueror's scriptures are the 3 principal paths, because everything the Buddha taught was to become a Buddha. It contains everything, all the meaning of the conqueror's scriptures combined. The path praised by the excellent conqueror children. A bodhisattva is a conqueror's child. So, of course, renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness would be praised by the excellent conqueror children, the bodhisattvas, and the port for the fortunate wishing liberation. So, of course, renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, if you are seeking the liberation of a Buddha. So we know that there's two kinds of enlightenment, or 3, if you would like to say it that way. You can clump them into 2, but there's 2 in the first one. So the liberation of the Theravada, Pali, Hinayana, however you would like to say that vehicle, the hearers and solitary realizers. Their type of liberation requires the renunciation and the correct view of emptiness. So their type of liberation requires that. And the liberation of the Buddha, though, the non-abiding nirvana liberation of the Buddha, the here in solitary realizer have an abiding nirvana. The non-abiding nirvana that a Buddha has requires renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness. So some people will explain that first part as, all of this is referring to the 3 principal paths. Then other highly realized great scholars will say that the first line, the essential meaning of all the conqueror's scriptures, refers to renunciation. The path praised by the excellent conqueror's children refers to bodhicitta. It's obvious. What would a bodhisattva praise? Bodhicitta. I mean, that one's like so clear why you would come up with that. And the port for the fortunate wishing liberation, you could say, yeah, the wisdom realizing emptiness is the entrance into the way you would get to be liberated in either way, any liberation, abiding nirvana, non-abiding nirvana, the entrance into that, the only liberating path is the correct view of emptiness. So this is the entrance into how you would become liberated. But then you have to beg the question, well, the entrance into becoming liberated, the correct view of emptiness. But wouldn't you need renunciation in order to have the foundation there? So then the debate would begin, and then you yourselves come to the conclusion. And I promise you won't be harmed by any interpretation of it, because it's just saying essentially the same thing. It's pointing out in different ways the excellent qualities of renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness. So just wanted to read this by Lama Tsongkhapa before we started the teaching. And then what I think is so important is whoever are not attached to the pleasures of mundane existence, who strive in order to make leisure and fortune worthwhile, whoever are inclined to the path pleasing to the conqueror Buddha, those fortunate ones should listen with a clear mind. No matter who you are, uh, you know, when you look at renunciation, you can break it into two kind of categories if you were going to put it in the small and medium scope. And you could say it wouldn't be an actual renunciation, but you have a desire to definitely emerge, renounce the lower realms in the small scope, which you must do for the medium scope. So you see how if you're not attached to the pleasures of mundane existence, well, Lama Tsongkhapa says that you begin your not being attached with not being attached to this life, and recognizing that you want a higher realm rebirth in your next life, and you don't want to be in the lower realm. So we'll learn about more of that later. But I wanted to start with that auspicious point from Lama Tsongkhapa's three principal paths, because I find it just so important to be able to correlate all of these things, to be able to look at all of the different teachings that Lord Buddha gave, and that Lord Atisha, Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, was so kind so many times to present us with that quote right at the beginning of the teaching from Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. Understand there are persons of three capacities, small, medium, and great. I shall write clearly to identify their individual characteristics. So we have this beautiful way to put all of the teachings into a framework of practice, and see how we can go from our state where we really are only thinking about the things of this life, to a place where we can evolve spiritually, where we begin to think of our future lives, and we begin to think about, well, if we have to be born in cyclic existence at all, then there's a major problem. This is a situation. And if anybody else has to, they have a problem. And I care for so many people, I wouldn't want to see any of them have that kind of problem. And then you widen your scope and see that you don't want anyone in the universe to have that problem. But this all comes from first recognizing that first level of fake, kind of renunciation, where you want to be free from the hell-hungry ghost and animal realm, and you devote this life to making sure your next life is free from that by engaging in the activities and the kind of meditations that will make your mind keep going to engage in those activities that will lead to a place where you will be projected out of this body. Your mind will be projected, ejected, right? Ejected, into a birth, in some sort of birth situation. And you want to make sure that you are going to have the conditions that you want to have. And specifically in the scope, you want to make sure that you have leisure, a situation of leisure, when we study it in terms of what kind of human basis, what kind of higher realm rebirth would you like to have? Well, the ultimate one that you can have now, we see, is the life of 8 leisures. And these, most of the opportunities, inner and outer, some of the outer opportunities are debatable, but we have these conditions now. So I really just encourage all of you to be able to understand how to correlate all of these teachings, to be able to see the framework, to be able to see how the three principal paths are connected when we look at how the teachings for beings of three capacities are given in the Lam Rim. In that quote by Lord Atisha, where he says these three capacities, we can even see in the three principal paths where Lama Tsongkhapa points out even the small scope, by saying that through familiarity with this, emphasis on the appearances of this life are reversed, with leisure and opportunity are difficult to find, and life has no duration, death and impermanence. So we see even in the three principal paths, if we can learn to look at the different texts, which we're going to try to do tonight, we can see how they're all correlated and they make sense together. So we imagine now that we have all sentient beings here with us, that we're sharing the Dharma with them. We've led them all here, and we're imagining the teachings being given in their own individual languages, and they're hearing whatever they need to in their own specific aptitudes, the way that the Buddha can do this. We're imagining we're bringing them somewhere that's really beneficial. The Buddha has the 60 melodious speeches and can proclaim one thing in an instant and answer all sentient beings' questions simultaneously, and it will be in their own individual languages, and it will answer their own questions. So the Buddha has this incredible quality that we eventually will have. So imagine now that we invite the enlightened beings, the merit field now, to be the witness to this. We've invited the bodhicitta field, all 6 realms of cyclic existence. Now we imagine the refuge field, the merit field. We imagine that Buddha Shakyamuni is in the space in front of us and looking into our eyes with such love and compassion. He came to this world 2,600 years ago out of just this immense love and compassion for all sentient beings, to show each and every one of us eventually how to achieve a state of perfect love, compassion, skillful means, power, and wisdom, how to achieve that state that only the Buddha has achieved. So we imagine Buddha Shakyamuni is looking into our eyes with this immense loving kindness and compassion, imagining His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Chenrezig in person, our wish-fulfilling jewel, is here in the space in front of us. This is a real animated being, not just a picture. You're imagining these actual beings are filing into the space in front of you. Lama Tsongkhapa was actually be able to call these beings in and see them assemble in the space in front of them, see the 35 Buddhas assemble in the space in front of them, and imagine that these beings are actually right there in the space in front of you, as they will eventually be, as the karmic obstacles to you being able to see the beings that are able to hear you no matter what that you call. So then you imagine Khenser Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, inseparable from Aryatara, my root Lama, who spent so many years with all of us, 25 years teaching us these holy teachings. We're so fortunate this being was in our world. Imagining Geshe Lobsang Gompo Rinpoche, Demo Locho Rinpoche, Khenso Lobsang Gyatso Rinpoche, all of these holy beings in the space in front of you. Imagining Umzala Geshe Aga Rinpoche and imagining Geshe Dorje Damdu Rinpoche La. Imagining Jeffrey Hopkins. All these holy beings, beings like Lama Zopa Rinpoche, any being that you consider a holy being who's had a profound impact on your mind, imagine them in the space in front of you. These are our guides. The source of all our good is the teacher. And these are all our teachers. The Buddha is our teacher. The Buddha can't wash away our negativities. The Buddha can't remove our suffering with his or her hands. The Buddha can't give us his or her realization. The Buddha teaches. The Buddha is a teacher. But the Buddha has the capital T for teacher, because the Buddha is the only one who knows the varieties of phenomena, both the varieties of ultimate truth and conventional truth, reality and diversity. So fortunate. So imagining these holy beings, now imagining the beings of the extensive deeds lineage passed down from Lord Maitreya to Arya Sangha and Acharya Basu Bandhu and Acharya Dignaga and Acharya Dharmakirti and Vamukta Sena and Hari Bhadra and Acharya Gunaprabha, Acharya Shakyaprabha, Lama Salimpa, Lord Atisha, J. Dron Tompa, right there in the space in front of you. We're so fortunate. Imagining the beings of the profound view lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri and Arya Nagarjuna and Acharya Buddha Palita and Acharya and Arya Chandrakirti, Acharya Chandrakirti, Acharya Shanti Deva and Baba Vega, Chandarashita, Kamala Shila, Yana Garba, all of these holy beings, and then Lama Salimpa, Lord Atisha, Dron Tompa, all these holy beings are in the space in front of us. Arya Deva, in the space in front of us. The lineage of blessings passed down from Vajradhara to Saraha, Matripa, Tilopa, Naropa, Lotsawa Marpa, Jetsun Milarepa, Jagam Popa, all these holy beings in the space in front of you, and imagine that Dron Tompa is passing down the Lamrim lineage to the 3 old Kadampa masters. old Kadampa masters' lineages. Now imagine the holy beings of the Nyingma, Padmasambhava, and Longchenpa in Jaimipam, imagining these holy beings, imagining the Sakya beings, Sakya Randawa, Satya Pandita, Satya Konganimpo, right here in the space in front of you, imagining the beings of the Kaju lineage, Jay Gampopa, imagining the Karmapas, imagining the beings of the Galupa lineage, Lama Tsongkhapa, Kirtupje, Jelsupje, Basuchuchi Jetson, Panchen Sonandrapa, Jayan Sheba, Janja Rupi Dorje, Gonchu Jimmy Wampo, all of these holy beings, right in this Purbajok, Jetsompa, all of these incredible beings are here. The seventh Dalai Lama, all of these holy beings in the space in front of you. Third, fifth, seventh, 14th, all of these holy beings are here in the space in front of you, the Dalai Lamas. Imagining the highest Yoga Tantra deities, Performance Tantra deities, and Action Tantra deities are in the space in front of you, all the 35 Buddhas and the protector deities. Now we're imagining all of the holy beings are in the space in front of us. So we have the merit field, and we're imagining all of the beings, even those high beings, any being who has an obstruction to omniscience, even left. So any beings who have afflictive obstructions or among the obstructions to omniscience, even an 8th, 9th, 10th ground bodhisattva, imagine, is here and able to do whatever they need to do in order to remove those last subtle stains that are keeping them from being omniscient, even if it's to show up to help us in some way, to be able to help us to understand the truth of suchness and to hear something that will in some way be able to be spoken to some being, a being like this, to be able to evolve their mind. So just imagine this is the kind of gravity that the teachings for beings of three capacities have, because the teachings for beings of three capacities lead one even to the completion stage of highest Yoga Tantra in the great scope. And no being will be enlightened without the completion stage practices. So now we have all beings that are possible here. Sentient beings and enlightened Buddhas. We're considering the merit field, in this case, Buddhas, all beings who have removed the afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience. This is how we're imagining it. It's how I'm imagining it. You imagine it however you'd like. I put names in front of the pandits to try to be respectful, which would seem to delineate Arya, Acharya. But I consider these all enlightened beings, all Buddhas. So this is how I consider my merit field. However you like to consider your merit field, I'm, just trying to share my practice with you. For whatever that's worth. Now imagine that the scene has transformed, and now you're with all sentient beings at Vulture Peak Mountain, and all of these holy beings are witnessing the same thing that, they're kind of still in the space in front of you, and now there's Vulture Peak Mountain, and the main characters of what you're imagining are Buddha Shakyamuni, Chenrezig, and Shariputra. Now imagine that this now interplay starts to go on, where the Buddha is dwelling and then blesses the minds of Chenrezig and Shariputra, and they begin to teach the ultimate truth, the truth of suchness. They begin to teach the definitive teaching. In the Madhyamaka Prasangika school, the definitive is the second turning of the wheel. The first and the third turning of the wheels are interpretable teachings, where we have to add something. We don't have a definitive teaching because it isn't about just ultimate existence, about emptiness. And for the Prasangika, it doesn't have to be taken at face value, the way that the Svatantrika Madhyamaka would say, that if it's taught, it has to be taught about emptiness and be able to be taken at face value. Prasangika says it just teaches about emptiness. And this is, the Buddha meant what he said when he presented things in this way, where he said that nothing, zero, not the mind, not the Buddha nature, nothing inherently exists. And nothing can be found to have its own way to be established, its own nature that establishes it from its own side. He says this thing that changes the way you start to think of the Dharma if you've only been sitting at the Buddha's teaching at the first turning of the wheel. and you were the target audience. It changes things because now it says the 5 skandhas are empty. Now it says the 4 noble truths are empty. And the 5 skandhas aren't just empty of having a self of person, that they're empty in terms of having inherent existence, that they're empty of being more than merely imputed by the mind on a collection that serves as its basis of designation. So the Buddha just really says this groundbreaking stuff at the second turning. And then the third turning of the wheel of Dharma is for those who are quite shaken. And, the Buddha interprets the teaching in a way that can feel more comfortable for those that may have possibly get led to nihilism. If you're looking at ways that why the Buddha would do what he would do in this fashion. So here, what is taught is that no phenomena has inherent existence because it dependently originates. It can't intrinsically be found within itself or as something separate in terms of its parts, something within its parts or separate from its parts intrinsically. It can't be found intrinsically within its parts or separate from its parts. And if it can't be intrinsically found within its parts or separate from its parts, then it's necessarily not inherently existent. So we're looking at the object of negation is the opposite of the way the Buddha says the mode of existence operates in this Heart Sutra, where he says that things are merely designated in dependence upon a collection that serves as the basis of designation. And that word merely means that there's nothing from the object side that appears to the mind to validate it from the side of the object to be included in the decision making process in the object. So here we find the most kind of subtle point that's being made, and that's the pronouncement of what the definitive is. And the object of negation is the opposite of that things are inherently existent. So what you're trying to get rid of out of your mind is that things inherently exist. And the way you do that is to say they don't inherently exist because they dependently originate. And when we look at dependent origination in the 3 levels, we see there's dependent origination of causes and conditions that all the schools agree upon, but then the dependent origination of wholes and parts that not really any of the 3 lower schools agree upon, and then dependent origination of imputation. So we see these levels of dependent origination, and the only thing that's going to cure the disease that I have, the misconception that I always have, is to be able to engage in ultimate analysis to find out that there is nothing that's findable from the side of the object to be established inherently, even conventionally. But then when I go back to conventional analysis, I see that there's an existent object, and I have to look at what the mode of existence then of the apprehension and the apprehender is. And we see that it's just merely designated in dependence upon a collection that serves as its basis of designation. And conventionally and ultimately, there is nothing that intrinsically exists according to this turning of the wheel of Dharma. And what that means is very, very heavy. Emptiness is the meaning of dependent origination, and dependent origination is the middle way, and therefore emptiness is the middle way. These are all formulas that we need to figure out. And if you stay with a qualified teacher, and if you go to teachings by teachers like Geshe Dorje Damdula and Umzala Aga, and you stay plugged into those great scholars who really know the finite details of these things, then you too will be able to achieve the state of perfect love and compassion, power and wisdom that the Buddha achieved. And without this wisdom, you won't be able to achieve that state of even a hero solitary realizer. Without knowing this emptiness, without discovering what the object of negation is, and eliminate and realizing that the object of negation doesn't exist, inherent existence doesn't exist, You have to realize that no matter what kind of liberation you seek, be it abiding nirvana or non-abiding nirvana, Hinayana or Mahayana liberation, whichever one you seek, you're going to need these facts. And these facts will lead you to understand that your friends and loved ones, starting with them, have this same problem that you have of adhering to believing in things that don't exist. Believing in inherently existent flowers. Inherently existent flowers don't exist, and we've never had seen a flower when it looks at the distortion. Our eye consciousness sees inherent existence, sees the object of negation. So every flower we've seen is an inherently existent flower. So we've never seen a flower that tallies with reality. This is weird. And this is why some of the other sects take it so far to deny the conventional truth, because everything that we're seeing, we're throwing inherent existence on. So have we ever seen something? Because we've only seen something with the superimposition of something that doesn't exist on it. So we've been looking at an entity bearing something that doesn't exist. And that's the thing that we say is a flower. I'll leave you with that. This is for your mind to play with. And then hidden within this text is the 5 paths, is the bodhisattva path, the conventional path, the ripening path that one has to go through to move away all of the obstacles and to keep the force of effort going to be able to get rid of those subtler and subtler levels of the afflictive obstructions, and then the subtlest things, which are the obstructions to omniscience, the nudri and shidri pacha. So we know that this is going to take some work, and it's going to take seeing emptiness over and over and over again, and it's going to need that emptiness that we see over and over again needs to happen while we're bodhisattvas, so that it's the ultimate bodhicitta that actually burns up the final 8th, 9th, and 10th bodhisattva ground problems, abandonments, which are the obstructions to omniscience, because he or she will no longer have afflictive obstructions, just like a solitary realizer, foe destroyer, but they still have the obstructions to omniscience that can only be gotten rid of with the ultimate bodhicitta being realized again and again and again, to the stage of the resultant point of the resultant ground after the final moment of the 10th bodhisattva ground. So hidden within this is the pathway that leads the ripening paths of here, in this case, the Mahayana, of path of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and no more learning. Those bodhisattva paths where you go through and eventually see emptiness at paragate, at the path of seeing, and then parasamgate, the path of meditation, you see emptiness again and again and again, and go through the 10 bodhisattva grounds to achieve the state of no more learning, bodhisoha, once you've completed the 10th bodhisattva ground. So I refuse to try to talk simple. You're all very intelligent people, have access to very intelligent texts. So I like to talk starting at this level, because I know that you can all get this, you can grasp this, and you deserve this information presented in such a way that you can go back and listen again, say, okay, I don't really understand exactly what that point is, or I don't agree with what he just said, and look at the great text by Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti. Look at the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. Look at Chandrakirti's illuminating the thought, the commentary on the Madhyamika Avatara, Lama Tsongkhapa's brilliant text, and see how emptiness is presented. See how selflessness of phenomena is presented, then selflessness of person is presented. See how conventional and ultimate truth are presented. And then see that then gets you to a kind of richer place than just kind of, let's try to make my day better with Buddhism. That gets to a place where let's try to make it so I never have to suffer again, and I have the most powerful state of existence, the most wise state of existence, the most loving state of existence, the most compassionate state of existence, the most capable state of existence that anyone in the universe could ever have. And this is the state of Buddhahood. that can only be achieved by the explicit teaching here, the definitive teaching, the understanding of the Madhyamaka Prasangika view, coupled with the hidden teaching of the 5 Mahayana paths. If you traverse these liberating paths and ripening paths, then you too will be a Buddha, and you can come help me. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard once that the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita, addressed in this way? Noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita should see in this way, seeing the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness. Emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form. Form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. So when you engage in ultimate analysis, just as an aside, when you move closer to the object to see if the thing you think inherently exists inherently within its parts or something separate from its parts, when you move closer to the object, you're trying to find inherent existence. You're not trying to just find general flower. You're trying to find inherently existent flower, for instance. So when you move closer to the object, you find a non-finding, which is merely a non-affirming negative, which is the lack of inherent existence. You lose the object because ultimate analysis doesn't engage the conventional object. It looks for true existence, inherent existence within that object. And if it was found, if that object were able to be found by ultimate analysis, that object would inherently exist. You see what I'm saying? So when we look at there's no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, what you arrive at with ultimate analysis is a non-affirming negative, a non-finding, a not finding of inherent existence, a not an affirmation, not an affirming negative that infers anything else. It just negates. So you're only negating inherent existence. And that negation has no business deciding whether a flower exists or not. It's when you go back to conventional analysis, after you, not me, but have realized a bit about the ultimate truth, you see that this thing does exist, so it must exist in a mode that's different than the way that I'm perceiving it. Then you come back and you have a flower again, but you see that that flower isn't found by ultimate analysis to even conventionally exist from its own side. So if it exists, if it's not objectively existing from its own side, it must be subjective in some way. And this is how we get to this idea in the Prasangika view that it's merely designated in dependence upon a collection that serves as a basis of designation. But there is an origin of suffering. Once we go back to conventional analysis, it's just subjectively existent. It doesn't exist right within the origin of suffering, right within the object origin of suffering. It's merely designated in dependence upon a collection. So I hope that makes sense. When you hear no eye, no ear, no origin of suffering, it doesn't mean that things don't exist. Things exist. They don't inherently exist. The object of negation is an inherently existent this or that. The non-finding of inherent existence doesn't say this or that doesn't exist. It just says it doesn't, the way you think it exists doesn't tally with reality. Ever. Unless you're seeing emptiness or a Buddha. Wow. No suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth, since there is no deception. Prajaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teata om gate gate paragate parasangate buddhi soha. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train the profound Prajaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, the whole assembly of the world, with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Kalajibe nijo dambane ngushe du chu ngai du du jen du baba lama yi bu shinzi nesun kandro so la sha zelo aga samara tishanara samara be aga samara tishanara samara aga samara aga samara tishanara samara aga samara aga samara Aga samara teshanda razamara ebe deata on gate gate paragate prasangate buddhiso papa conchi sanji gaye demi doji je loba doji meba doji shewa doji dragi baji mede beje danji je dingorias o agerindo jaji je shewada medo ne bejin dan roada on tumba junjin bunzon zunjoji dashi de janden dade le show. Outer mandala offering as a request for teaching. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. Imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. Zaji beji shi me do drari ra lin ji ni de jen ba di san je jin du mi de u a di zhe gan da xin la jo ba jo jie zhen la ma dan ba jin nan ji jie jie jia la jian zi zhen zhen ji jie da san be du jie zin ma la Saji juji java vadu zoye dangoro rana mandala gani rata yami Sanje jodan zaji jodan la janju badu dani jasuji Dagi chushe ji besonanji Drola benji sanje juba sho Sanje jodan zaji jodan la janju badu dani jasuji Dagi chushe ji besonanji Drola benji sanje juba sho Sanje jodan zaji jodan la janju badu dani jasuji Dagi chushe jibe sonanji drola benji sanje juba sho. And from Nagarjuna's Mulya Madhyamika Karika, the final verses. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to abandon all views. To you, the Buddha, Gautama, I pay homage. Okay, so great to see all of you. It's so wonderful to be able to talk about Lama Tsongkhapa's foundation of all good qualities, the source of all my good, a text Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche went over so many times. We're so fortunate, and we've also been able to receive teachings from other teachers on this text, and I just rejoice in the fact that I've received it, and any among you who've received it. It's just such a wonderful thing. And if you haven't received it, this teaching that I've received is passed down through an unbroken lineage from Buddha Shakyamuni through the Nalanda Pandits, through the various lineages, and makes its way to me from Namgyo Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche and Geshe Lobsang Gompo Rinpoche and Khyentse Lobsang Gyatso Rinpoche and Geshe Lobsang and Umsala Geshe Aga Rinpoche, and then of course Geshe Dorje Damduo Rinpoche. All these holy beings passed this incredible lineage down, and Jeffrey Hopkins, of course, and Khenpo Palden Sherab and Khenpo Tsewang Dongyo, all these lamas that I've been able to be blessed by. But really, it's Khyentse Geshe Wandak who, week after week, taught us the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and taught us the Lam Rim texts for 20 years. But the great treatise alone on the stage of the path to enlightenment, a decade, 10 years, going line by line through it. And of course, once we got to the calm abiding and special insight section, I mean, the translator was broken. But we luckily, because of the kindness of the Lam Rim Chenmo Translation Committee, had that third volume to be able to just at least read and pick whatever I could get out of it to help share with you. And we're so fortunate to have this. And hopefully in the future, we can go over that section again and look at it in more and more great detail and see the negations that are being made and understand what Lama Tsongkhapa is really pointing at and showing us the object of negation and showing us, though, how not to lose within this one entity, to be able to hold on to seeing the appearance itself, dependent origination, it negates its inherent existence, but seeing the emptiness of inherent existence shows the kind of existence of the conventional existence. It's this one entity that holds these kind of two attributes that can be isolated, called the conventional reality and the ultimate reality. Everything has these two realities, these two, we call them truths, but they're not truth because conventional truth is false. But we call them truths, and every entity bears this. Every existent bears these two truths, has these two truths. And Guy Newland just gave a really awesome teaching. I encourage all of you to watch. It's on YouTube, on Shravasti Abbey's YouTube site, and you can watch this amazing teaching on the two truths and start to get a feel for how Lama Tsongkhapa presents conventional reality and some of the critics. But I really feel I would agree with Guy Newland that Lama Tsongkhapa's presentation of Chandrakirti is really, really the most clarifying presentation for my mind, that works. So when we look at the foundation of all good qualities, the source of all my good, we see that Pabonka Rinpoche breaks it into those three categories, starting with how to find a teacher and what to do once you find a how to find a teacher and how to kind of act and react around that teacher. So the actual category begins, it's a preliminary, the very root of the path, which is how to take a lama and serve him or her properly. So Pabonka Rinpoche says that this first stanza deals with that category. So we say, the source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to him in the proper way is the very root of the path, and grant me then to serve and follow him with all my strength and reverence. So we see that for Pabonka Rinpoche, that's the very first category of this text. And we can find the correlation in the Lam Rim Duden, Lama Tsongkhapa's abbreviated stages of the path, where it says the root of creating well the auspicious conditions for all good things of this and future lives is to rely properly with effort in both thought and action on the sublime spiritual teacher who reveals the path. Seeing this, never forsake him or her, even at the cost of your life, and bless him or her with the offering of following their advice. I, a yogi, practiced in this manner. You who aspire to liberation should do likewise. So we find a longer point made, and these are the foundational practices, sometimes put into the small scope, but it's really the foundation that gets you into the small scope. But then one could also argue then it's something that you practice. You have to have this teacher, you rely on the teacher and thought and practice, and you have this life of leisure and opportunity that you develop a gratitude for, so you actually want to take the essence of life. So that has to be there really for you to practice the small scope. But to be precise, the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment starts the small scope header section once you get to death and impermanence. So if you're being technical, which is great, then that's how you would read it. And then the next category is what you do once you've found a lama, according to Pabonka Rinpoche. And then there's advice to heed, which he would say is the next stanza about, what the advice you should heed once you take on a teacher, falling again into the foundational practices of leisure and opportunity in the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. You see it kind of go in that order. You see the relying on the teacher, and then the meditation section, meditation session, and refuting misconceptions about meditation. And then it gets into life of leisure and opportunity. And then you find, as I always say, the handout of the flyers for the 3 scopes, and then gets down to business with the small scope. So bless me first to realize that the excellent life of leisure I found just this once is ever so hard to find and ever so valuable. Grant me then to wish and never stop to wish that I could take its essence night and day. So here there's advice to heed that's being given. Once you've taken on a teacher, you should see that you have this basis of opportunity that can do so much. And you should really make use of this thing that was so hard to get because it requires so many causes. And we look at all of the examples that prove to us how hard it is to get. And we look at the numbers of beings that actually get it. It's very, very small. So we know it's hard to find and ever so valuable. Why so valuable? Because we can practice the teachings for beings of 3 capacities. And if we really did it right, we could achieve enlightenment. We could achieve Buddhahood, just like Jetsun Milarepa did in this lifetime with these practices. And not with different practices, with these practices. This is what we need to understand. We need all of these practices. People say, oh, well, Milarepa didn't study. Do you have these practices in your mind because Milarepa did? The way you get them in your mind is studying. Maybe you have magnificent imprints and you have renunciation already. Day and night, we'll define it soon. Wanting to get out of cyclic existence. Maybe you have that. I certainly don't. I need to study it and learn about it more and reinforce my mind with it. So Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Duden correlates in this way. This life of leisure is far more precious than a wish-granting jewel. Finding such an existence happens just this once, hard to find, and yet like a flash of lightning, it easily vanishes. Contemplating this, you must see all mundane pursuits like empty grain husks floating on the wind, and you must extract the essence of your human life. I, a yogi practiced in this manner, you who aspire to liberation should do likewise. Now we get into death and impermanence, the next stanza. So this would technically fall into the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity, or the teachings for beings of small capacity, if we're not looking at it in terms of an integrated path for us to achieve Buddhahood. If we're only looking at it like, hey, I only want to have make sure my next lives are good in cyclic existence, then we're just a small scope teaching for beings of small capacity. But if it's a teaching that serves as a foundation for the medium scope teaching that serves as a foundation for the great scope, then we say teaching shared in common with beings of small, and then teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity. We use that shared in common with term in terms of the integrated path. Now we get into the small scope. My body and the life in it are fleeting as the bubbles in the sea froth of a wave. Bless me first thus to recall the death that will destroy me soon, and help me find sure knowledge that after I've died, the things I've done, the white or black, and what those deeds will bring to me, follow always close behind, as certain as my shadow. Grant me then to be careful to stop the slightest wrong of the many wrongs we do, and try to carry out instead each and every good of the many that we may. So here this gets into the teachings for beings of small capacity, or teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity. In Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, those who know that those who by whatever means seek for themselves no more than the pleasures of cyclic existence are persons of least capacity. So Lama Tsongkhapa in the Source of All My Good, in these 2 stanzas, is referring to the small scope teachings and condensing the small scope teachings of death and impermanence, reflecting on future lives, going for refuge, a bunch of karma stuff, and the 4 opponent powers. So you'll see how in the abbreviated stages of the path to enlightenment, Lama Tsongkhapa gives us a little more meat on the bones to understand what is meant in the medium capacity, more than Atisha's Lamp is given in the source. and then more than the source is given in the medium stages of the path, the Lamrim Duden, and then even more is given in the medium stages of the path, the Lamrim Din, and then even more is given in the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, the Lamrim Chemo, which is really the root text for all these smaller texts. And then the root text for the Lamrim Chemo is the Tisha's lamp for the path to enlightenment that he vastly explains with an umbrella of the Abhisama Alamkara over the top, as Lama Tsongkhapa says. Wow. Okay. So we know that we've arrived at the small scope. So what does Lama Tsongkhapa say here? There is no certainty you will exclude birth in the lower realms after death. So we see the topic of future rebirths in the lower realms, the hell-hungry ghosts and animal realms, which are a potential for us once we're ejected from this life. The moment we're ejected, we could take on a form of a lower realm being in the bardo or immediately be there. So we start to want to renounce that and be free from that. So this section, we recognize that death will come, nothing can stop it, and we don't know when. And the only thing that will help us is Dharma at that time, if we don't want a horrible situation full of terror in our future lives. So the Dharma that will help us be free of the terrible situation in our future lives in terms of cyclic existence is the Dharma of the teachings for beings of small capacity, or shared in common with beings of small capacity. So we want to day and night, if we look at the definition of renunciation, when we renounce all realms of cyclic existence and then we shorten it to just the smaller realms, we would day and night be wanting to practice the small scope to get out of the lower realms of cyclic existence if we're really practicing the small scope. So it's not the small scope sounds like a small scope, but it's a highly realized level of practice that one should never underestimate and never look at it as such a small preliminary. These are things one must realize and move beyond, as Pabunka Rinpoche says in one of his letters, move beyond a correctly assuming consciousness, Yichu. Because if you have correctly assuming consciousness only, it's very easy to go backwards to a wrong consciousness. You may have a correct assumption, but that doesn't mean that you've proven it to yourself to be correct. You may have just gotten lucky without a reason. So these are dangerous positions to be in, and you need to saturate your mind more and more and more with these topics until you realize them to the point where day and night, if you're a small scope practitioner, you're trying to get out of the lower realms by going for refuge and engaging in the ethics that abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities. And then once you engage in negativity, knowing how to purify it through the 4 opponent powers. So these are really important things to become certain about. And when you get certain about death and impermanence, and then you couple it with the foundational practices that you have this life of leisure, the 8 leisures, and among the 10 opportunities, depending the outer and inner opportunities, depending on how you look at it, you say, I have a chance now, but I can die. I better get going. And get going means day and night wanting to get out of the lower realms within this scope. So I think that that's clear. I wanted to make sure I gave a very clear overview. We're going to get to the great scope, but this is how I want to get there. So then we move into the next category, which is the medium scope. So let's start with the root text in this time. The Atisha's lamp for the path to enlightenment. Those who seek peace for themselves alone, turning away from worldly pleasures and avoiding destructive actions, are said to be of middling capacity. So here we get into a being who wants to get out of cyclic existence altogether. They engage in all of the things that the small scope practitioner engages in, but then add on the 3 highest higher trainings. The highest higher trainings in ethics, concentration, and wisdom, which as the foundation, the first, we have to have ethical behavior, the Vinaya basket, and then the Sutra basket and the Abhidharma basket. So we see this presentation, and the presentation of the 4 Noble Truths at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma comes in here, where we see the pronouncements, the truth of suffering, truth of origin, truth of cessation, and truth of path, and the 12 ways that the Buddha pronounced that, and understanding the various sufferings of cyclic existence and origins of cyclic existence based on that. So you begin to want to understand those 4 truths, because the first 2 truths show you how you're bound to cyclic existence, and the second 2 truths show you how to be unbound from cyclic existence, how to be released. So it's important to understand the Four Noble Truths. And then in this section, in the medium scope, in the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment, we find the topics of suffering, the 8 sufferings, the 6 sufferings, the 3 sufferings, the origin of suffering, a kind of bigger look at origin of suffering with the 12 links of dependent origination, and then ascertaining a path that leads to liberation of the 3 highest higher trainings. So then let's read what Tsongkhapa says about all the stuff I just said. Bless me to perceive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them. They cannot be trusted. They are the door to every pain I have. So here one has recognized now you're moving into the medium scope because you're seeing contaminated happiness as a problem, the suffering of change. You're recognizing the suffering of change, and you're recognizing the pervasive compounded suffering that throws you again and again and again into a set of contaminated aggregates beyond your control, driven by, because of the contaminated karmas, afflictions, and their corresponding seeds, and driven at the root by self-grasping ignorance. Here we learn in this medium scope, we learn how to then undo that which binds us, and we learn how to undo the suffering by applying the 3 highest higher trainings, ethics, concentration, and wisdom. So again, I didn't mean to circle. I think I just did a circle. That's all right. Bless me to perceive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them. They cannot be trusted. They are the door to every pain I have, and me to strive instead for the happiness of freedom. Grant me that these pure thoughts may lead me to be watchful and recall what I should be doing. Grant me to give the greatest care to make the vows of morality the essence of my practice. They are the root of Buddha's teaching. So you're seeing, hey, all these things I think are great are really the suffering of change. They're the bait that keeps me in cyclic existence. And they're the door. This bait just keeps me coming back to cyclic existence. Please bless me to realize this, that beyond my control, I'm being driven into states where all I get is the suffering, the suffering of change, or a kind of holding place where I get to stay and then sooner or later be thrown back into suffering and suffering of change. No matter where I end up in cyclic existence, I'm mapping towards that. So Lama Tsongkhapa says something very interesting here, and makes it very clear that we must meditate on the Four Noble Truths. You will not get out of cyclic existence for yourself if you don't. You will not become a Buddha if you don't understand the Four Noble Truths. It's all so important. So in the medium scope, we find these practices. We find the 12 links of dependent origination. And I really encourage you to learn about projecting links and projected links and acquiring and acquired links and all these different things, where the karmas are in the links and where the afflictions are in the links. I really, really encourage you to get to know these things that in the picture of cyclic existence, the Lord of Death holds in its fangs. And there's a Buddha on the outside that got out, that came to teach us how to do the same. So then small scope and the song of experience. There is no certainty you will elude birth in the lower realms after death. Protection from, so I didn't read, I want to read in the medium stages of the abbreviated stages of the path, the small scope, because I read the foundational practices. So the being who wants to get out of just the lower realms of cyclic existence thinks like this, and then we'll lead into the medium. The medium's very short. There is no certainty you will exclude birth in the lower realms after death. Protection from such terror lies in the 3 jewels alone. Make firm, therefore, the practice of going for refuge and ensure that its precepts are never eroded. This depends in turn on fully contemplating white and black karma and their effects, and on perfectly observing the ethical ideal. I, a yogi, practice in this manner. You who aspire to liberation should do likewise. Until you obtain the best form suited to the excellent path, you will fail to make great strides in your journey. Therefore, To create all the causes for such a form, your three doors so sullied with negative karma and transgression, it is especially vital to purify your karma obscuration. So prioritize constant application of the four powers. I, a yogi, practice in this manner. You who aspire to liberation should do likewise. So now we see the smaller type of renunciation I spoke of, the not real renunciation, but we have a renunciation of the lower realms of cyclic existence in the small scope. Moving into the medium scope, the practitioner recognizes that even these happy things are contaminated in our suffering, are the suffering of change. And even if I were to be able to achieve the peak of existence, where I don't have the suffering or suffering of change, I will again have to repeat the process of acquiring those types of suffering if I have self-grasping ignorance, because that's what binds me to cyclic existence. So someone in this particular context becomes smarter because of an analysis of the actual current state. He or she sees that the actual current state isn't satisfactory and nothing within cyclic existence could be because of the downfalls of cyclic existence. So in the abbreviated stages of the path now, full renunciation is explained, and then we'll move to the three principal paths to show how the small and medium scope are presented, and then renunciation is defined. So here we begin with the medium scope. We read the medium scope where we said, bless me to receive everything that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life, up to making the vows of morality the essence of my practice, being the root of Buddhist teachings. So now in the abbreviated stages, Lamrim Dudan, it says, without striving to contemplate the ailment, the truth of suffering, a genuine aspiration for liberation does not arise. Without contemplating the causal process of suffering's origin, the way to uproot cyclic existence is not understood. Thus, it's vital to prioritize seeking renunciation through disenchantment with cyclic existence and to recognize the links that chain you to samsara. I, a yogi, practice in this manner. You who aspire to liberation should do likewise. So you're chained to samsara, and you see the Buddha in the picture of the wheel of life standing outside of the circle. And it's the reason the Buddha is able to stand outside of that circle is because he or she was able to cut the link of ignorance that gives rise to the link of action, karma, that gives rise to the link of consciousness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you take the ignorance out, you don't have the attachment. You don't have the eighth link. And if you don't have the eighth link, then you can't have an existence that comes out. You won't have a birth. This is just the fact of the way that it works. So you have to recognize the links that chain you. And the Buddha has figured out how to break the chain. That makes sense. Like the links of a chain, the 12 links chaining you. The Buddha broke the chain by getting rid of the first link. So this is a way that you can look at it that I find very, very helpful. Looking at the 12 links of dependent origination and seeing what the heck is really going on here. You know, why am I living the way that I'm living, and etc. So I encourage you all not to be satisfied with partial instructions and to look into all these texts in this way, and you know, be able to move back and forth and see where this isn't here and where that isn't there. And I think that you'll find like an immense amount of joy as it all starts to make sense together and as you're able to discover little bits and pieces of it. So when we go back to Lama Tsongkhapa's three principal aspects of the path. So just to recap, we just talked about finding the teacher and then taking the essence of this life of leisure and opportunity. And then we moved on to the small scope of death and permanence and refuge and karma and, you know, how to engage in virtuous karma and abandon non-virtuous karma and apply the four opponent powers, which then shows us how to be free from the lower realms. And then we moved on to the next scope, the medium scope, where we learn how to get rid of all the realms of cyclic existence that are plagued with suffering, 8 types of suffering, 6 types of suffering, and the 3 types of suffering by disengaging the process that brings it about, by cutting the root of cyclic existence, by applying the 3 highest higher trainings of ethics, concentration, and wisdom. Combined allows one to cut the root of cyclic existence. So, and then achieve in the medium scope case an abiding nirvana of a hero or a solitary realizer. So And Lama Tsongkhapa's three principal aspects of the path, we see the topic of the foundational practices kind of put in there about leisure and opportunity and fortune are difficult to find. And then we see the small scope being just kind of snuck in, and life has no duration. So death and impermanence. Through familiarity with this, emphasis on the appearances of this life are reversed. So here, when you meditate on the suffering of the lower realms of cyclic existence, you instead of trying to get a bigger this or a more important that in this life, you're trying to make sure that you're going to get out of the lower realms of cyclic existence. So once you realize that that's your main goal, and if you look at what's coming up, it should be day and night, then emphasis on the things of this life, just good to try and have a little bit of pleasure in this life, is reversed, and you start to look at a broader use of cause and effect. The medium scope is presented. If you think again and again about deeds and their inevitable effects and the suffering of cyclic existence, the emphasis on the appearances of future lives are reversed. So in the small scope, you were like, yay, let's get good next lives. In the medium scope, you say, let's get no more lives in cyclic existence and have the life of a hearer, a solitary realizer. Have that kind of life, because that's a life. Life isn't suffering for everyone. So the medium scope allows you to reverse that. If having meditated thus, you do not generate, here's the kind of measure, how you would define renunciation to see if you have it. What's the measure? If having meditated thus, you do not generate admiration, even for an instant, for the prosperity of cyclic existence, and if an attitude seeking liberation arises day and night, then the thought definitely to leave cyclic existence has been generated. So if we look at the small scope and apply the same definition, we would say that, day and night seeking freedom from the lower realms. So if you have that kind of mind, then you will engage in, you want to definitely emerge from the lower realms of cyclic existence. You will engage day and night in that which gets you that goal. So I think it's all pretty straightforward, and I hope that you can see how these systems work together. And the last thing I'm going to do is just tease you with the great scope. I'll read just the two stanzas from the source. The great scope in the perfection vehicle, and then it gets into the great scope in the tantric vehicle. So I'll just read two stanzas that kick off the section of the great scope, the perfection vehicle, great scope, the common part, great scope, and then there's more common parts than the calm abiding and special insight, I understand. But calm abiding and special insight actually relate to the medium scope too. So I've always found that interesting. And I think it's because Lama Tsongkhapa says in the medium scope in the Lamrim Chemo that, hey, I'm going to explain this more in the great scope, so I won't explain it here. So it just follows the pattern of the Lamrim Chemo. But it's interesting if you look at it. I have slipped in, so from Lama Tsongkhapa's Foundation of All Good Qualities, the 14 stanza poem, we're still in that second section of what do you do once you've found a Lama, according to Pabunka Rinpoche, in his commentary on the Foundation of All Good Qualities. There's 4 sections. First section, the teacher, and then the second section is what you do once you have one. I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. Bless me to see that every living being, everyone my own mother, has fallen in too. Grant me then to practice the wish for enlightenment, to take on myself the task of freeing them all. Bless me to see clearly that the wish itself is not enough, for if I'm not well trained in the 3 moralities, I cannot become a Buddha. Grant me then a fierce resolve to master the Bodhisattva vows. So I want to read you this part from the 3rd Dalai Lama's text, Essence of Refined Gold. It's a Lamrim commentary. It's beautiful. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has his translation, has his commentary on it, The Path to Enlightenment. And also just want to show you some of the books I'm using. The Abbreviated Stages of the Path came out of Thupten Jimba's beautiful translation of the stages of the path and the oral transmission, selected teachings of the Galupa. I really like the translation of the abbreviated stage of the path in that, even though I have it in much smaller text. I brought this, and sometimes you have Fifth Dalai Lama's text and Gomchen Ngawang Drapa's text, and you have some Panchen Lama text, and then Guru Yoga text. It's really a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book. But the third Dalai Lama wrote a Lamrim commentary, and yeah, we're going to read from it today to kick off the section. To kick off the section on the Great Scope. So the third Dalai Lama is, of course, the Lord Sonam Gyatso. Although by means of the higher trainings in ethical discipline, concentration, and wisdom, one can attain nirvana or liberation from cyclic existence, this attainment in itself is not sufficient. Of course, for one who has gained nirvana, there is never again the need to wander in samsara. Yet, because only a part of one's faults have become overcome, the obstructions to omniscience have not, and only a fraction of perfection has been attained, only if you don't have omniscience or power or perfect power, one has not really fulfilled oneself from one's own point of view. So even if you achieve nirvana, you haven't fulfilled all of your own needs from one's own point of view. So there's a need to look to a goal of complete Buddhahood, which is ultimate fulfillment from both one's own and others' point of view. So you first start, may I become a Buddha? That's your point of view for the sake of all sentient beings. The first 6 perfections are for your qualities. The last 4 perfections, looking at 10 perfections, are to ripen others' qualities. So there's a need to look to the goal of complete Buddhahood, which is ultimate fulfillment from both one's and own others' point of view. Moreover, one should not think to gain Buddhahood merely for one's own benefit. One should want it purely in order to be able to be more efficiently and deeply benefit all sentient beings. Just as you have fallen into the ocean of samsaric misery, so have all others. And they, like you, know only frustration and misery. There is not one of them who previously has not been your father and mother again and again, and who has not shown you unimaginable kindness. It is only justice that if you are to gain liberation and omniscience, they too should be freed from anguish. It is primarily to benefit them that you yourself must reach the state of peerless, non-abiding nirvana, and for this you must generate the supreme Bodhi mind, the enlightened attitude. May I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Abhisama Alamkara, wishing enlightenment for the sake of all, for sentient beings. Wishing enlightenment, wishing the perfect enlightenment for the state of sentient, for the sake of sentient beings, for the sake of other beings. So we find this kind of definition of bodhicitta in the Abhisama Alamkara. And then, of course, from here, we'll go on and we'll go into the Great Scope section. And we're going to get into bodhicitta quite heavily. And we're going to look at Panchen Sonam Drapa's general meaning of perfection, where we have Den, Ju, Ngo, Rapche, Ken. We have the basis, cause, nature, divisions, and then the benefits of bodhicitta. So we'll talk about that. We'll get really into it, and it'll be fun. And Lama Tsongkhapa then in the Great Scope says this: also, if this thought definitely to leave cyclic existence is not conjoined with generation of a complete aspiration to highest enlightenment, it does not become a cause of the marvelous bliss of unsurpassed enlightenment. Thus, the intelligent should generate the supreme altruistic intention to become enlightened. All ordinary beings are carried by the continuum of the 4 powerful currents, are tied with the tight bonds of actions difficult to oppose, have entered into the iron cage of apprehending self, inherent existence, are completely beclouded with the thick darkness of ignorance, are born into cyclic existence limitlessly, and in their births are tortured ceaselessly by the 3 sufferings. Thinking thus of the condition of our mothers who have come to such a state, generate the supreme altruistic intention to become enlightened. And we know that the entrance to the Mahayana is bodhicitta, because we've studied Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment so well with Namgyal Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche that we know that the entrance into the Mahayana, the 5 Mahayana paths is bodhicitta. The entrance into the 5 paths for hearers and solitary realizers is renunciation. So with that, I think we've learned enough for this evening. And I encourage all of you to just take this and then go look at the text and look at the Lamrim Chemo and the medium stages of the path, and then look at the Indian commentaries. And I just really, really encourage all of you to do so because it's of such amazing benefit. Concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Isandrapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Any mistakes that I've made, I apologize for them. May they be purified by this mantra. Vajrasattva Om Benzasattva Samayam and Valaya Benzasattva Zainu Vajida Dida May Vaza the Guy May Vaza May Vanarag May Vaza Vazini May Rajasattva comes to make it him Chian Guru Ma Bhagavan Sarvatata Kata Benza Baba Mahasamaya Saba Ahom Fe. May we always be protected by Paul and Lama, who Kensei Geshe Wandak Rinpoche and Geshe Lobsang Gompo Rinpoche said is our protector. Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jinjikalara Jamo Rama Chidacha Tunjo Rulo Rulo Hongjo. Oh. Samanta Bhadra dedication. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samanta Bhadra. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. A long life prayer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the wish-granting jewel in our world right now, Chen Rezi in person. May we not have any obstacles to being able to keep receiving his teachings in all of our lives. And specifically in this life, may he remain and continue to teach us and live into many, 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 many more years. In the pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All powerful, Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara's end. And a prayer of supplication to Namgyal Kensei Geshe Wandak Rinpoche to return, written by me. And may we all keep this in mind and remember what a holy being we had such close access to. And I was thinking this morning, I wake up in the morning and I think about this opportunity that I have. I do. I think about the opportunity that I have, and then first thing that I try to go do is make prostrations. First thing, I try to stand up and make prostrations to my Lama, who's inseparable from the deity, because I found the most amazing part of my day for 2 years, 7 days a week, not missing one day, was making prostrations at his feet in the last couple of years of his life. I remember that. I was making prostrations this morning and I remembered him being like right there, 6 inches, a foot away from my hands on the ground, and being able to touch my head to his feet. I remember that. This is such a holy being we had access to. A complex yogi poses as a simple monk. Homage to Kensei Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible, to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Om, 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 Om. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Atisha, who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings of beings of 3 capacities. Now that sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood this sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our heart would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all of our lives, wherever we may be. never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. And from Sachen Kunga Nipo's parting from the four attachments, we'll end with this. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you are attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. Let's all try to cultivate renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, and traverse these scopes that lead us to the completion stage and to the resultant state of Buddhahood. Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate your kind listening. We'll see you next week. Take care. Thank you.